There's a very interesting letter that was sent by the Green Party, by Jack Lennox and Molly Scott Cato, to Adam Baxter, the Director of Standards and Audience Protection at OFCOM. And I'm going to quote a good deal of it, I'm afraid, so if you can sort of prepare yourself for this. I'm writing to you in connection with a segment broadcast by GB News yesterday evening during the State of the Nation show hosted by Jacob Rees-Mogg. This is the show that Jacob Rees-Mogg does as it's a sort of sideline to his main job. He was elected to the House of Commons. And I think for the House of Commons, he gets £70,000 a year. For this show, he gets £32,000 a month. So you can see why he does it. And he's actually very good at doing it, but it's questionable. Let me get back to the letter. The segment of concern gave a wholly biased account in the verdict of the trial of Donald Trump for sexual assault, including comments by Kary that were designed to undermine the rule of law. I'm going to show this in a minute. On the basis of this segment and a string of other violations of the broadcasting code, we're asking you to revoke GB News' broadcasting license. As your own guidance, and then he talks about due impartiality, which certainly isn't there. In this particular segment, there was Jacob Rees-Mogg, Kary and Nigel Farage, all of them flag wavers for Donald Trump. So who was questioning Trump's behaviour, number one? Number two, the letter goes on, in the case of Rees-Mogg himself, we feel that your specific guidance, can politicians present TV and radio shows, how our rules apply, has opened the door for politicians to engage in partisan broadcasting masquerading as news and current affairs, and to undermine the General Regulation 5.5. No politician may be used as a newsreader, interviewer or reporter in any news programme unless, exceptionally, it is editorially justified. Your specific guidance includes the following. In general, serving politicians cannot be a newsreader, interviewer or reporter in any news programme. They are allowed to present other kinds of shows, however, including current affairs, but generally speaking, if it's a news programme, a politician cannot be present. Extraordinary, because of course GB News is in the name, isn't it? It's not GB Playtime, GB Adventures. That, of course, would be presented by Matt Hancock, wouldn't it? So, in this case, Jacob Rees-Mogg is significantly more at fault than Matt Hancock. I find it sad because I enjoy a little bit of Jacob Rees-Mogg, bizarre though that may seem. Now, this television programme followed the news that Trump was found guilty of abusing E. Jean Carroll. So we can actually say Trump is a sex pest. And yet the way Rees-Mogg presented this gave the impression it really wasn't much at all. Let's look at that section.
Civil case. The jury, deliberating in the rape trial of Donald Trump, has found the former US president not guilty of the rape charges made against him. The civil lawsuit was brought by writer E. Jean Carroll, who accused Mr. Trump of raping her in a Manhattan department store in the 1990s. The verdict was returned as not guilty on rape charges. However, it did find that he sexually abused her. The ex-president was also found to have defamed Miss Carroll in a Truth Social post in 2022. The jury has awarded Miss Carroll $20,000 in punitive damages for battery claims against Mr. Trump, along with $2.7 million in compensatory damages for defamation by Mr. Trump. The total amount of damages awarded to Miss Carroll is $5 million, so that's about £4 million.
And Rees-Mogg himself goes on and on and on about morality, and he's very amusing about the church and theology and so on. But today he's made an attack on the Archbishop of Canterbury, but he draws a distinction, he says, between politics and the sort of morality which is controlled by, or which is supervised by, the Archbishop. So does he not think that sexual abuse is important? That's really all I would like to ask. And Kary doesn't think sexual abuse is the issue. She thinks it's about a witch hunt. Let's listen to what she's got to say.
I'm now joined by the US midterm Republican candidate for Arizona and supporter of Mr. Trump, Kary Lake, and our very own Nigel Farage. Kary, thanks so much for coming in. And as it's not a British election, I think without breaking any rules, I can wish you very good luck.
Thank you.
But tell me, what does this mean for the Republican Party? What's it mean for Mr. Trump's presidential hopes?
Well, I think people who are following politics in America know they're seeing what's happening. They're trying to line up as many lawsuits as they can against President Trump. This is part of what has now gone on for 8 years, a barrage of negativity and, in many cases, media lying and defaming the president. And now he's getting found guilty by a jury in New York, one of the most liberal cities in the world, frankly, in the country for sure. And we've seen just a constant witch hunt of this man. I think they're trying to set things up going into the election where he looks so damaged that they try to convince even a few voters here and a few voters there that they're just exhausted with him and they need to move on. And I don't believe that the people will move on from President Trump that easily.
Do you think this is undermining confidence in the American legal system?
Our legal system is a mess right now. Obviously, you can look at what they've done to President Trump. They've got the DOJ going after him. They have the DA in New York City going after him. They don't even go after murderers in some cases in New York, but they're going after President Trump, left and right, left and right. You're seeing it constantly. And I'll tell you what, this is dangerous. I'm a mother of a boy, of a young man, and this is a dangerous time. If somebody can just throw this out there from allegedly happened 30 years ago and accuse you of something like that, drag your name through the mud, and because of our judicial system being such a wreck right now, where there is not parity and fairness, ruin you and financially ruin you. It's dangerous for all men in our country.
And are Republicans doing it to Democrat candidates and political figures, or is it working very much one way?
It's very much one way, but right now what we're seeing is a uniparty. There's even some Republicans in that uniparty. It is the political apparatus, the political elite that's been running the show in America for decades, and they do not like an outsider like Donald Trump. So we have a uniparty made up of primarily Democrats, but also some Republicans who are really starting to, go after the America First candidates. America First candidates are a threat to that system because we're going to stop feeding the beast of Washington, D.C. and the swamp and start addressing the concerns of everyday Americans who have been left on the sidelines struggling while the political elite continue to pad their pockets and line their pockets.
And then we get to Nigel Farage. And Nigel Farage, of course, adds to this idea that Trump is being persecuted because the entire legal system in America has fallen to pieces. It's not Trump who is at fault, it's the legal system that is at fault. And, he's very convincing, but I think fundamentally wrong, when it's not our job to repair the American legal system. It's our job, actually, to respect it. And in a program which claims to be a news program, we should be a little bit more reserved in what we say. Or if we want to be as provocative as this program is trying to be, then we should have some balance. It's only a short while since OFCOM castigated GB News for the Naomi Wolf anti-vax thing, where she was saying the vaccinations were like mass murder, comparable to doctors in pre-Nazi Germany. And, they were slapped down by OFCOM. And now I think with good reason, OFCOM is being asked to do the same to Jacob Rees-Mogg and his friends. It's simply... It's disturbing. I would love to have a chat with Jacob Rees-Mogg. I'd love to have a chat with Nigel Farage. I have no idea who this Kary Lake is, and I don't particularly want to find out. I don't particularly like her views, but Farage, we've got a lot of business to deal with, and Jacob, well, we won't agree, but we will find it entertaining, and I think he should be challenged occasionally.
So, Nigel, this is the US equivalent of the Blob. But you saw President Trump very recently.
Yeah.
What was he in good spirits? Was he expecting this? Was this sort of par for the course for...
I would say his mood last week up at Turnberry, one of quiet anger. Quiet anger is good because you can turn quiet anger into a positive as opposed to rage, which never leads to anything good. I think he knew that one or two of these things were coming down the track. On the bigger picture, you know, when the Americans had the War of Independence and broke away, they didn't like George III much. I was joking earlier, nor did we particularly. But when they set up the American Constitution, they chose to take the best from our country, and they genuinely did, and they wrote a brilliant document. But the common law system they took from us, they have completely and utterly corrupted. I mean, how can you be sued for defamation, for putting out statements defending yourself ahead of a trial? I mean, I find that extraordinary. The plea bargaining system in America, when 98% of cases that go to court finish up with plea bargain, guilty verdicts. Something has gone very wrong with the common law system in America, and that has allowed it to become intensely politicized. I mean, surely a judge in a civil case, as this was, or a criminal case, would say to a jury that if you're going to convict on any of these charges, you have to prove in your minds beyond reasonable doubt.
But you don't in a civil case. That's the whole point.
Well,
in a civil case, it's balance of probability.
Yes, but I still think, Jacob, I still think that anybody sitting on a jury in an even-handed way would say, where's the evidence? And why did it take her 23 years to report it? I find the whole...
Well, I mean, in America, unlike here, people can speak to the jurors and find out why they thought what they thought and why they came to their decision. But don't you think the Republicans must take some of the blame too? Because they have put any number of Republican judges in the federal system, and therefore the politicization of the legal system in the US is not just a Democrat.
No, it's not. You're absolutely right. And of course, Donald Trump had the opportunity to get a conservative majority, there on the Supreme Court, because that fell into his lap. Look, their judiciary has become too politicized. These are the consequences of it. And I think America needs fundamental change of its legal system.
I think Americans are distraught right now looking at our judicial system, saying it is so uneven, it is so unlevel, that there's no way that if they are on the conservative side, the America First type conservatives, that if they ever got caught up in the system, that they could get a fair shake. And that's a dangerous place to be when the majority or a large portion of the population looks at the judicial system and says, it is rigged against us, and we can't trust in it.
And it undermines democracy, doesn't it? Because if you lose at the ballot box, you go to court.
Right.
And we've seen this in the UK in terms of judicial reviews and so on and so forth. But that's civil and that's against the government. It's not against individuals so much. In the US, it's much more visceral. That you go back to the impeachment of Nixon, the impeachment of Clinton, that you lose the election and therefore you go for an impeachment. And the impeachment of Trump followed. And that judicialization of politics, even if very justified in certain cases, has to an extent poisoned the well.
Well, this is in the New York courts as well. New York is a liberal state. They have incredibly liberal folks working in the judicial system. And then you have a jury, an anonymous jury. Their names were kept out. Nobody can interview them. I suppose they could come forward now. And you've got people in New York who've been poisoned against President Trump for 8 years, nonstop negative coverage. They literally hate the man, and they're sitting on the jury. How do you get a fair shake? How do you get a fair jury in a situation like that?
It's all very bad for America, though, isn't it? The divisions in America are very, very frightening. A big warning to us, Jacob, here, I think.
Well, one of the occasions when we mustn't follow our cousins across the Atlantic.
Absolutely.
Thank you both very much. During the